From proud hunter to ravening, curse-infected beast, Garruk Wildspeaker is one of the most interesting planeswalkers around. Greetings, hatchlings! We are here today to talk about Garruk Wildspeaker. What I want to do is I want to go over all the lore of Garruk, but we're not going to do it in just one video. I realize this is going to work better as a series because Garruk's story is an interesting one, right? He starts out as a fierce hunting planeswalker, and later on he turns into a green-black, cursed by Liliana, deranged planeswalker. And it's a really interesting story arc. So I figured we would handle it in chunks. This is a new idea I had to try a different spin on the lore. So where to start with Garruk? It seems like the most likely thing to do is to start at the beginning, right? To go ahead and take a look at his upbringing, his childhood, and all of that. For anybody who doesn't really know who Garruk is, just to give you the Cliff Notes version, he starts out as a green planeswalker, very heavily aligned with beasts and creatures of nature. He is not one of these like hooked up with the elf style planeswalkers. He's very much looking for the biggest, proudest, meanest, fiercest hunting beasts and things of that nature. He wants to hunt crazy beasts and bind the most fierce of them to his service. So some prey, if it's weak, it just gets wiped out. He doesn't think about it at all, really. If it's really powerful and it puts up a good fight, then he will actually bind it to him so that he can summon it up in different battles. There are a number of cards throughout the history of Magic that illustrate all this, but we will save that for a separate video where we take a look at all the cards and everything of that nature. But just to give you an idea, he summons up big beasts, he reveres strength and ferocity, and he has a strong distrust for mankind and basically almost any sentient non-animal style beings, and for good reason. So, to understand this, the best thing to do is to take a look at his childhood. Now, the information that's available isn't 100% fleshed out in terms of we don't know much about what his life was like before the age of 10. We can make some suppositions. He was born on we don't know the plane of existence that he was born on. That has yet to be revealed. Now, the good news is, for those of you who think that Garruk is never coming back, it's pretty much confirmed through Mark Rosewater that at some point Garruk will be making a return as a fan favorite. So I'm very pleased to hear that. Regardless, at this point, we don't know what plane he was born on. What we do know is that his father's name was Racklin, and his father Racklin was a green task mage, all right? And so these are mages that have specific skill sets, right? It's like, okay, I can work this, I can do this. And basically, the story of Garruk really starts to unfold on his 10th birthday. It's a really momentous day for him. His father brings him out to the fields, and they live in this very lush, forested and pastoral area where you can see gigantic fields of green surrounded by trees. So he is deep in the heart of a location rich with green mana. That makes sense when we're dealing with green task mages and things like that. So his father is a farmer. So Garruk spent his life growing up on a farm. He would have a very rustic, uncivilized, a certain level of civilization. As you're a farmer, you do have a certain level of sophistication, but it's not like a suburban level of sophistication, right? It's like people who live out in the country versus people who live in a city kind of mentality difference there. Anyhow, on this farm, on Garruk's 10th birthday, his father tells him he's going to show him what his real birthday gift is, and he starts to teach him about green mana and basically how to use it in terms of nature and the farm work specifically. So he tells Garruk to reach into the soil, and at first Garruk uses his hands, but his father's like, no, not use your hands. Reach out and feel the seeds that are in there. And he's like, watch me. And so he shows Garruk, and he uses green magic to cause a bunch of seedlings to grow, like an entire row of seedlings to grow. And then Garruk goes ahead and tries. Now, he was only growing one little sapling at the time, right? Just one little plant. But either way, he manages to do it first try. And his father compliments him on his talents. He says, you know what? I actually couldn't do that until I was 13 years old. So you've got a natural talent for this, boy. And then his dad's actually kind of a dick. He goes, now you just got to do that 50,000 more times. And it shows this huge expanse of all the fields that Garruk has to grow these seedlings up in. He's a task mage, right? He's being raised in this lineage. That's what you need to do. You're feeding an entire sort of kingdom, fiefdom, however you want to look at it. It's under a, like the sort of old school medieval king rulership. That's the style of world that he's living in. The feudal, that's the word I'm looking for. So he's living in like a feudal kind of world where these task mages are subservient to lords and people who are above. And this subservience actually comes into play again halfway through his 10th birthday. He spent the first half of the day laboring in the fields before his life gets changed completely. What happens is the sheriff of the land, along with his troops, arrive at Garruk's family's farm, and they do the whole proclamation stating that Garruk has to enter into military service. It's required. All children of, not all children, but all male children of a certain age are required to go ahead and enlist, and Garruk has reached that age. So they are there to actually go, okay, you're coming with us, you're going to be part of our troops now. Now, Garruk's father has a huge problem with this. So he protests. Basically, he's told, he basically says, no, you can't take him. And then the sheriff says, if there's a problem, you are allowed to refute this with the Duke. You just have to go to his keep. But Garruk's father, just being unreasonable the way he is, just freaks out and says, no, you won't take the boy. At which point, he ends up basically being arrested. The sheriff tells the troops, cut this guy down. And Garruk's father goes to Garruk, run, boy. And basically he puts a little amulet in Garruk's hand and tells him to run. He tells him that through the amulet, he will be able to speak with him and that he needs to flee and hide. So Garruk goes and runs off into a nearby woods, and it's a massive sprawling woods. So he runs off into the woods with this little ornament here, and his father ends up just going, you can't do this to me. And then you hear him screaming. So his father has been captured or destroyed. Garruk doesn't know at this point. He's hiding in the forest. He's being pursued by the sheriff's men. At a certain point, a gigantic Baloth, those lizard-style creatures specifically from Magic, ends up smashing through the woods and eating the sheriff's soldiers. Not all of them, but enough that it causes chaos where Garruk can run away from them, so they can't manage to get a hold of him. They lose some of their numbers there. And Garruk is just he's a little 10-year-old boy stuck out in the forest all by himself, and there's no one there. And the voice of his father starts to speak through the amulet to him, and it's telling him, I need you to hide just for a few days. Just for a few days, and that's it. But after a couple of days, he hasn't heard from his father, and then boom, out of nowhere, his father goes, hey, you can't do this to me. And he hears the screaming as he doesn't know what's happening to his father. But the last things that his father say to him are essentially, you cannot trust anyone. You can't trust anyone who speaks, basically. Trust only those who don't speak. It was a very clear indication of you can trust the animals, you can't trust men. Men can speak, and speaking equals deceit, essentially, is what his father says to him. So Garruk ends up kind of huddling down in this forest, and his father had told him as part of the whole, don't trust men, trust in nature, trust in your power. So Garruk is being faced down by this Baloth when he's still just a 10-year-old boy. You got to understand, obviously he's from a line, his father got all riled up, no, you won't take my boy. So Garruk is from that same sort of angry lineage with a level of bravery. Because the level of bravery it's going to take to stand up as just a task mage who grows plants, to stand up to the sheriff with all of his armed men with him, that's a certain level of bravery. So Garruk exhibits the same kind of bravery, even more so, when there's this huge Baloth coming in, and he reaches out with his hand, and you can see the green mana flowing through his hand as he touches the beast's nose, and he bonds with this Baloth. And he starts to do that with different creatures out in the wild. And for the next 7 years, Garruk avoids contact with mankind altogether. He spends 7 years, from his 10th birthday until the time he's 17, he spends roaming through these forests, just making bonds with these beasts, hunting with them, finding stronger beasts and stronger beasts. You know, basically, he keeps stepping up his game. It's like he tames some smaller Balos, then he uses them to start taking down larger prey. Instead of letting the larger prey get fully destroyed, he takes them down most of the way, and then he bonds with them while they're weak. If you've ever played Dungeons and Dragons, the concept of like subduing a dragon, that's essentially what he's doing. And it's really, really cool, honestly, the way they do it. So, after 7 years of all of this, he's now a 17-year-old guy who has bonded with these massive beasts. At this point, then he heads off to the city where the sheriff that took his father in is living. He's basically like, it's vengeance time! And he goes rampaging in with these Balos. And he says, he just starts screaming like, where is the sheriff who killed my father? And so the sheriff ends up coming out and says to Garruk, like, you're freaking out over nothing, really. If you're here about your dead dad, well, come with me because we still have your father. And Garruk, even though his father said, don't trust men, they are deceitful, he goes, I don't know if I should, but then he follows him anyways because he wants to see his father. So, of course, it turns out that the sheriff is lying to him. He takes him down into the prison where his father's body is, but his father is long dead. You can see the sword that was used to impale him is still there sticking out of him, and his body has been there for 7 years now, the entire time, just sitting there moldering and decaying. So Garruk gets locked in this cage here with basically the corpse of his father, which is pretty rough. But Garruk at this point has bonded a bunch of crazy creatures, and it's not just Baloths, it's other nature creatures. So he starts channeling green mana into the ground and summons up a massive worm which busts through the floor and chews the sheriff up, just bum, 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 bum. And that ends the arc of Garruk basically starting out as a child task mage all the way up to the beginning of Garruk, the more wild hunter. Now we see him a little further on in his aging when we get to Lorwyn, but that encompasses the first chunk of the story that I'm going to tell you here. So there's obviously more. Coming up, we've got a situation where Garruk will encounter Liliana and end up being cursed and warped by her. And that, it just makes it so much more interesting. He becomes a green-black aligned planeswalker, and there's a lot of juicy meat on that bone. But we will save that for another episode. So let us roll the golden scroll so that I can show the people who have my back on Patreon or through channel memberships. Genuinely appreciate the support that you give the channel. And everybody, if you want to know more about Garruk, go ahead, hit the subscribe button if you so desire. I normally don't bother bringing that up, but it's an easy way to keep track of what I'm doing. And also, if you enjoy Magic lore, I have a massive playlist of it that will be linked right here in a few seconds at the end of the video. So, thanks for being here, and I'll see you later.